You're listening to Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right. Well, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for this show. So, we're back once again. I know we've hit a couple of rough patches where we haven't been with you guys. But rest assured, we're back. And tonight, of course, we're going to be reviewing the 6th episode of The Bad Batch called Tribe. And because we were not on this past Monday, when we were supposed to do Attack of the Clones, we will be doing an in-depth analysis of Attack of the Clones this coming Monday at 8. So you guys aren't going to want to miss that. And, of course, we'll remind you again at the end of the show, especially because people might be joining us a little later. So The Bad Batch has been really interesting this season. I can honestly say it looks like to me, I'll be interested to see what you're thinking here, but it seems like they're taking more of an episodic approach than the story arc approach, like what they took with the first season, right? Because you had the mystery of Omega, and they were trying to figure out what was up with that, and then, of course, you had the whole thing with Crosshair and everything. Whereas this one, it seems like maybe the first 2 or 3 episodes sort of tied into each other, but the last 2 or 3 that we've gotten, and keep in mind, we're a little over a third of the way into the season now. It seems to be giving us these just kind of one and done things, which, again, I know I actually have said in the past that I don't necessarily mind that, because especially the way that they've set things up, right, where it's almost like a Charlie's Angels thing. They get a mission from Sid or whatever, they go on it, and then they run into whatever adventure. However, I will say, though, I did enjoy this episode, but it almost seems to me like they don't really, I don't get a sense of where they're going with this season at all.
Yeah, there is a cohesive would say that they're not a story where we're kind of, have a story arc or anything nature. It's really, like you said, kind of been more of an episodic style season so far. And maybe there's a twist at this. Maybe they're setting something up. Maybe we're almost it's 16 episodes of this series, right?
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. We're like a third of the way. 16. We're a third of the way through. You could say last, because last, 5 times 3 is 15. So, you could really say that pretty much at this point in time, we are a third of the way into this season, which is really strange because you would think by now we would understand the point, I guess, of this, what the season is about. And again, I don't mean to imply that there's anything necessarily negative about it. It's just the approach that they're taking.
Sure. Yeah. The approach is different than what we've seen in times past. I don't know if that's good or bad at this point. So far we've had some, we've had some cool episodes. We've had some kind of, fillerish or, unnecessary, episodes, in my opinion. But this one in particular, though, I really did enjoy. This brought me back. The last couple of episodes kind of had me.
I know.
But this one, I was like, all right, because now we're dealing with content that we're familiar with, content that, in my opinion, means something. It has a little bit more depth to it versus just like, okay, let's find some stupid buried treasure somewhere. This is actually about they're going on a mission, and then they run across Gungi, which we haven't seen since the Clone Wars.
Right.
So that was cool.
Yeah, it is. And I guess that's really where I'm a little bit torn, because on one hand, there was a lot of things about this episode that I thought were really great. We have that action back. We have the meaningful mission again, right? Like there's something, it's like you said, it's not just, hey, let's do the Bad Batch version of Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, or, something like that. Or the last episode, which, Because I remember we didn't like the last episode at all.
Not really.
In fact, I remember both of us were sitting there saying it was really, really difficult to get through. But, now, like you said, we have the return of a Clone Wars character, which is really interesting that they're dealing with that aspect of it. And, of course, anytime they tie in the Clone Wars and everything with this, it makes perfect sense. And really, they should do that a lot. Now, I'm not necessarily saying they should shoehorn a bunch of Clone Wars characters into this thing, but in pretty much talking about the differences between what it was like under the Republic versus what it's like in the Empire, and that whole transitional period that they have, it's really nice to see some of this stuff, and it was fun. It was a fun adventure.
Yeah, this one was really fun. It was really cool. It had a lot of different dynamics to it. Of course, we kind of start off our team. The Bad Batch kind of ends up on this space station or whatever, where they're trying to barter for some some things or whatnot, and then of course, Omega kind of does what Omega does and getting doesn't completely follow directions and ends up running across these droids, kind of assaulting this Wookiee. And so she kind of comes to his defense and what have you. And what I really liked about this whole scenario was the fact that, like, although Gunji at first was kind of like, okay, cool, I get out of the situation. And it was cool how they hid the fact that he was a Jedi for a little bit until he actually used the Force to retrieve his lightsaber. And then I was like, oh, okay, that was cool. But then, you got it. The really cool part about it for me was that, once they kind of rescued him, he wasn't so welcoming to his rescuers, and it's because of Order 66. They all look like they're all dressed like clone troopers, and he knows, like, okay, last time I saw you guys wiped us all out. So
Yeah.
it's kind of like, I'm not so trusting in, but then eventually he kind of, warmed up to him and, realized that, okay, these are friendlies. And as they travel back to Kashyyyk to, return him back to his homeworld, because that's where he's like, all right, well, my Jedi thing is over with because they all practically been destroyed. So let me just go back home, to which was kind of a cool thing, but it was kind of disheartening because he's never really been to Kashyyyk, because he has vague memories of it because when he was a baby, but they snatched him up when he was a child, and he's been living this whole Jedi life, so he's never even really had a chance. He doesn't even know who his tribe is. He's just kind of like, I mean, I know I belong here, but I don't know anybody. I don't even know.
Well,
where I
yeah, that would
belong.
be like, if you were kidnapped from Earth as a baby or something, and then you brought, that's the thing that a lot of times people think, in Star Wars, you think on more of a planetary scale. So, oh, we're going to Tatooine, or we're going to, Naboo, or whatever it is. But in this case, okay, you're bringing them back to, that'd be like bringing somebody back to Earth and just going, oh, well, where do you belong? Well, I don't know. I don't know what country I'm from. I have no idea whatsoever. And we forget things like that. We forget the little details like that. So that's a really good point.
Yeah, that's what I really loved about this episode, that little detail of, like, we have to remember that he doesn't have all the knowledge that he should. I'm sure he's probably picked up knowledge just from being in the Jedi Temple and in the library and reading about his culture and things, because he knew what to do in certain situations.
Sure.
Like the whole praying tree thing. But and that was the cool thing too, just learning even more about the Wookiees, because we've seen them a little bit more lately, and we've got a chance to see their planet in was it no it was
Revenge of the Sith. Yeah,
it's where we really got to see Kashyyyk. And we've always heard about it, and we always knew about it through Chewbacca in a way, but now we're kind of like, okay, cool, here's some more interesting facts about it. Like, we always knew that Kashyyyk had these huge trees, and they kind of lived in like a tree house. It kind of reminds you of a nicer version of Endor,
Well,
the Forest Moon of
that's
Endor,
the
I
whole
should
thing.
say.
I mean, everybody forgets that Return of the Jedi was supposed to feature Wookiees.
Yep.
And what happened was, it was either like it would have been too violent or something. I forgot what the actual official explanation was, but Lucas essentially created like these kitty versions of Wookiees, called them Ewoks, and yeah, I mean, in a lot of ways, there's a lot of similarities between the two because
Sure.
he was pretty much just trying to create another version of them. But
It was, yeah, because it was kind of funny, like watching Return of the Jedi, and when Chewbacca was swinging on that vine to land on the Scout Walker, and he had two of the Ewoks like hanging on to him. I mean, he totally looked like a dad, like with his kids or something.
well, sure,
That's
that's it.
but
I mean, there are some differences, I guess, but I mean, they're pretty much the same thing,
yeah,
and it's true. I mean, when the episode first begins, you totally think that this is going to be one of those typical, okay, Sid sent him out on a mission kind of thing, and they're going to run into some trouble or whatever and get out of it, which, I mean, essentially that's kind of what happens, but right, the fact that they find Gungi on the ship, and then, of course, he reveals himself to be who he is. And then, of course, those of us who have actually watched the Clone Wars were all freaking out going, oh, wow, okay, cool. And then, of course, like you said, it actually just takes this completely different turn when they get to the Wookiees. Now, here's what's funny. This is how they should have handled the holiday special. I'm just saying, right? Because this is, if you look at the second, not just second half, really, I would say the last 2/3 of this episode was really kind of Wookiee-centric. I mean, sure, you had the Bad Batch
Oh,
there,
yeah.
and they were interacting. But, I mean, there was a pretty heavy Wookiee-based storyline. And I couldn't help but think while I was watching this episode, this is how the holiday special, of course, now they have like 40-some years of canon that they have supporting this whole thing, so maybe it's a little easier in some ways. Some ways I'd say it's more challenging to find storylines because you have more content out there and you have to worry about continuity and things like that. But they could have handled the holiday special a little bit more like this because, again, it wasn't silly and stupid. I mean, you really got the sense of when, I don't know, elder lady or whatever was talking to Gungi, and they,
yeah.
and they were working out all that and trying to find the village. And then, of course, you had some of the adventure stuff, too, where the clones were trying to find the village. And then, of course, the biggest thing that I thought was really cool was bringing the Trandoshans in. Because now, we all love Bossk. So anytime you get to see these guys, that species in something, and we know that they were big Wookiee hunters that the Empire hired, and Bossk always had the Wookiee pelts and all that stuff. I mean, Boba Fett did too, but it was really more of a Trandoshan thing, It was almost like an arch enemy kind of deal.
Yeah, I mean, that was really it was really cool just to kind of see that adversarial context between the Trandoshans and the Wookiees once again, and
they were cruel. I mean, it was.
Oh yeah, I mean, those guys are vicious, like by nature. Like you're looking at their, just their natural disposition.
Right.
It's very aggressive, very barbaric in a way, and they just really kind of revel in that. I mean, in some ways, like, you want to be mad at it, but you can't help it. That's just how it's almost like being a predator, right? I mean, that's kind of what they are. They're kind of like a predatory animals. And so, while you got the Wookiees who can be savage and can be ruthless, for the most part, I mean, they are warriors, but they're not looking for trouble though. They're just kind of to themselves until things come to them. But the Trandoshans, they're all about like seeking, and it's almost like seeking what I can destroy type thing. So
Yeah, the
um
flamethrowers and everything. I was just like, all right, these
yeah,
guys
man. I
are.
mean, those guys were just kind of like, all right, I'm gonna get to him. But it was cool to see his Gunji's Jedi training, because when we last left him, he was building the very lightsaber that
Right.
we see him wielding in
Yep.
there. Because there was this whole Clone Wars episode where Ahsoka took the younglings to Ilium to find the crystals for their lightsabers, and he was one of those Padawans. And so now we don't really know. I mean, I'm assuming, because even though Wookiees can grow to be pretty tall, he does still hasn't. He's grown some, but he doesn't look like he's fully matured. So
Well,
he
and he's
looks
still
like
a
he's
kid. I
maybe
mean, part of
a
that is you got
kid.
to.
Yeah. So
Well, he has to be anyway, because even though there's been a number of years between
hmm
this time period, we have to remember this is still earlier, in that whole period between episodes 3 and 4. But the other thing that we got to remember too is that Wookiees have a pretty long lifespan.
yeah, I was just about to say that they're kind of almost like the same species as Yoda or whatever. Where they live a very long time. I mean, they
Yeah,
can
I mean,
live
not
about
quite.
600 years. I mean, they
I don't know.
probably,
I always thought it was
you
like a
know,
couple hundred.
maybe,
We
but
might have to look that up. I think the Wookiee lifespan is like 200 years or something like that, but it's double that of a human even then, So
yeah, it's still impressive, right?
yeah,
So,
so it's still. I
so
mean,
yeah,
it still means that even if you're, I don't know, 40 years old or something, you're still a kid. And I mean, not that much time has passed. I mean, the end of the Clone Wars. If you figure that Clone Wars episode takes place maybe, I don't know, a couple of years or something before Revenge of the Sith, because I think it's a 10-year or not. Yeah, it might be. I know it's a 10-year gap between Phantom Menace and Attack of the Clones. I forgot how much time it is between Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, but you have to factor the entire Clone Wars in there. And so you got to figure out how many, there's 7 seasons of that. Season 7 basically overlaps with episode 3. So that's kind of the same time period. But you got to figure, he's probably only, at the most, maybe like 15, 20 years old.
yeah.
So, I mean, he's
So,
still
so
pretty young.
yeah, and I really enjoyed just the thought process that the Wookiees had. Like, okay, we're gonna hide our civilization, even though the Empire has tried to come in and pretty much decimate us. We're gonna just take our village a little bit higher into the trees,
Well,
and they
or
kind of
deeper
have their
into the
own high.
forest. But you know what
Yeah.
that reminded me of a little bit was in episode 1 with the Gungans, when the Empire, well, the Republic actually
Oh
came,
yeah.
it was pretty much the Gungans went even deeper into
Oh
they had that
no.
whole little hiding place, that water hiding place that they had, because, at first the Gungans thought they were safe because they figured that they would only, the Trade Federation would only attack the
The land.
the land part, until they eventually did invade that, and then they had to retreat deeper in. So that's kind of what that reminded me of, was a similar thing where it's like, okay, the terrain, you definitely have the advantage. So
hmm
they're going even deeper in to try to pretty much hide from them. And this is all tying in because there's a lot of books, there's a lot of things, both in the expanded universe and even in new canon, although it doesn't go quite as much as the expanded universe did. Aftermath Life Debt sort of does, because that's really focused more around Chewbacca's debt to Han Solo. But other than that, you pretty much have this whole thing where the Empire pretty much hunted down and enslaved the Wookiees, and they there's a reason why the Wookiees hate the Empire, basically. And now we're seeing that in action, which I thought was really, really cool.
Yeah, I mean, it was cool to see that Gunji still had some of his wits about him. He still had a lot of his his Jedi training, we saw him able to use the Force to talk to those spider-looking things,
Yeah.
um, and
And
then which kind
that
of
was
reminded me of
even
the
handled.
Mandalorian as well.
Yes, it did. But what I really liked about it, see, The Mandalorian pretty much handled it the way that every sci-fi movie with giant spiders handles it.
Mm,
This one, I thought was actually kind of cool, where it's like, no, if you don't show any violent tendencies or you're not a threat to them,
aggression.
basically, they'll leave you alone. Or even kind of help you in a way. And it was cool when Gunji, had his lightsaber drawn and they're kind of looking at him. He's like, yeah, okay. And he kind of puts it out and they're like, cool. And then they turn toward the head Trandoshan guy, which I thought was
Yeah.
awesome.
It kind of reminded me of the movie Arachnophobia and a little bit of oh, what's the other movie? But it's basically where they Pitch Black. That's what it kind of reminded me
Yep.
of.
I was going to say, to me, it gave you some Pitch Black or Starship Trooper vibes.
Mm.
Because it was kind of the same thing,
Yeah.
especially when you had, a scene to where they pull the camera up and you just see what they're doing to this guy.
Yeah.
Although I was surprised because at first there's a couple of things. At first I thought they were just going to tear him from limb to limb, but they didn't. They actually were catching him up in some sort of web or something. Yeah, and then I thought it almost looked like Gunji was going to save him.
Yeah, and then
Because he kind of looked, and it was sort of like,
he's like, I should, but nah.
Right, and that's the thing. It's one of those things where I was looking at it going, is he going to actually save him? But, obviously he didn't.
Yeah. Yeah, I really enjoyed this. I really enjoy, then watching Omega kind of, she's still learning the world. She's still trying to learn, like, okay, they believe that the trees are, even though it was funny listening to the rest of the guys in the Bad Batch, like, okay, well, the trees have a plan. Okay. They
Yeah,
just tried to go along with it. Like, I thought that was kind of funny, just how they played into it.
Well,
Like,
sure,
all
because they're
right.
in a lot of ways, this is what I love about the whole series, not just this season, but the series in general, is that they are the lens by which the audience is looking through. I mean, we're pretty
Mhm.
much on that journey with them. And so just like we're sitting here watching it going, trees have a plan. Okay. They're basically embodying that in the story. And I think that that's a really clever way of doing it because they could have us being more spectators with the Bad Batch. But in a lot of ways,
Yeah.
they put us in the same lens, on the same plane as the Bad Batch. They're essentially an extension of the audience, really. And I think that that's a really clever thing, too.
Yeah, I mean, when it comes to these different forms of storytelling, it's really um cool just to see what aspects they or in veins that the writer may try to go in for that particular episode or whatnot. And even in that point, it was Gunji who was talking to the trees, and the part that I think that some people might not have clued in on is the fact that he is a Jedi, or in that Jedi part of the Jedi Order. The Force flows through all living things, so you got this tree here, and it's just like, okay, it may be feeding him, like people thinking that it's talking to him, like, hey, do this, but it's really, the Force is kind of like working through him to kind of come up with this plan. So I thought that was kind of a, like, on one hand, it's mystical on both sides, but one we could actually point to that says, you know what, that could be possible because we
Mm-hmm.
know he has the Force. Versus if he wasn't a Jedi, then now we solely will have to believe that the tree is talking to him. So,
Well,
I
and not
kind of
only
like that.
that, I mean, this goes along with that, too, because earlier when he was using the Force essentially to kind of talk to those spider creatures and
Hmm.
communicate the intent, that was something that we haven't seen for a while. I mean, sure, when Ezra talk to the
Ezra.
space whales and rebels and everything. And then, of course, even, Anakin himself, right, in Attack of the Clones, which, again, we're going to talk about on Monday, when he was sort of studying that creature and trying to communicate his intentions or whatever. I mean, you see some of that play out in various content in the franchise. So that's actually cool that they did that.
Even with Rey, when in the sequel sequel trilogy, even though she was just healing that snake thing,
still she had to
I think
tell it what she was doing in a way. Yeah,
look, just calm down, relax.
exactly. It's not what you think. I'm not trying to attack you here. I mean, and that's again, it's through not only each one of the franchise films in the comics and some of the novels and I mean the animated shows. I'm probably the Disney Plus shows, although nothing's really coming to mind, but in a good portion of the franchise itself, throughout all its content, you see many examples of the Jedi using the Force to communicate with creatures and basically communicate their intent or maybe influence their decisions. And so it was kind of cool to see that happen here. In another non-cliche thing, it's also cool the way that I think that the Bad Batch deals with Omega. Like you said, she's still discovering the world, but they don't try to treat her like a kid. They let her make her own decisions and do things, and they basically support her. I mean, because, if you look at this episode, she gets him in trouble twice. Well, kind of.
Yeah.
The first time, of course, is when she pretty much goes to engage and save Gungi. And the Bad Batch, they didn't know. They were still trying to deal with the whole little chips or whatever that, the counterfeit things to fool the Empire, those IDs or whatever they were. And all of a sudden they're hearing blaster fire. I think they even said, like, no, I think that blaster fire is Omega. It's either Omega or Echo.
Yes, probably Omega.
And probably Omega, exactly. And it's kind of like, all right, well, I guess we're in this now. They don't really chastise or anything like that. They kind of let her make her own decisions on what she wants to get involved in, and then they back her up.
Yeah, even so much so they're like, okay, well, they were hurting him, and so we have to take them. But it's like they're the adults, what I'm saying? They're the adults, they have the experience, and they're still like taking orders from this kid, which is so weird to me. But it's kind of like, all right, but they still view her kind of as an equal in a way.
Well,
Not
that's
completely,
it. Exactly.
but,
It's not completely. It's sort of like a Padawan, if you're going to make a comparison.
Yeah.
Where they respect the fact that they're, they have a position in the group, but it's a subordinate position. And, in a way, they do the same thing because Gungi then engages the Trandoshans and the clones, the clone troopers that were there. And so they're like, oh, well, where's he going? Okay, well, I guess we gotta suit up and do it again. I mean, I found it really interesting that the proper guys, the Bad Batch proper, let's call them, your Hunter, your Echo, your Wrecker and all those. It's like you said. I mean, they were almost either taking orders or direction, and from Omega primarily, and even Gungi to a degree. It was almost like it was their show. They weren't really taking the lead per se. They were more providing muscle and backup, and it was a little bit strange because it's not the dynamic that you would normally see in a situation like this.
Not at all. Yeah.
Which was bewildering, but it was kind of refreshing in a way, too.
Yeah, I mean, I think they're just trying to allow her to grow up, but they're protecting her so she can see her mistakes when she makes them, but at the same time, they're there to back her up or get her out of stuff, if need be. Yeah, I think it's an interesting dynamic between Omega and the rest of the batch. It seems like she has more of affinity for Wrecker because she seems to hang out with him a lot,
Yeah.
And Hunter. More Wrecker for fun and just adventurous type stuff. But then Hunter is more giving her Hunter and Tech kind of give her the knowledge of certain things, like kind of give her education. Like Hunter's more the teacher of the world, and then Tech is kind of he's the technical one, so he kind of gives the details of how things are done.
The way that I would break it down is Hunter is more the practical knowledge, and Tech is more the academic stuff. It's really more like that. But yeah, definitely they're the ones that take the lead in, I guess, doing the mentorship or the most teaching. But again, it makes you wonder if this season is going to have an overall plot that just hasn't been fully realized or revealed yet, or is it going to continue in more the episode of the week kind of a thing? Which, again, I mean, either approach would be okay, although considering the franchise itself has but kind of like its own story arc, right? I mean, the continuing things that are happening between episodes 3 and 4. I mean, we've had a lot of content that takes place during that time period. So on one hand, it would be a little refreshing to have something that's a little bit more episodic in nature, but at the same time, it could almost be detrimental if they don't acknowledge the overall story arc that's going on, which they kind of have. I mean, when you look at this episode even, you have pretty much the Empire enslaving the Wookiees, and, this is yet another... I mean, you have stuff that's a little bit more epic and grand in scale, and then you have things that are more localized. This is kind of a localized thing. This is what's happening on Kashyyyk. But it started out as just another, hey, here's a mission from Sid. We're dropping off these I mean, I don't know whether they were codes or IDs or whatever, but some identification thing of some sort that would fool the Empire, right? It just looked like another typical adventure.
Run-of-the-mill mission.
Yeah, and yet it didn't go anywhere the way that you would think when you were watching the first 5 or 10 minutes of this episode, which was actually a really cool thing because, like you pointed out, the last couple of episodes, it's just like, well, okay. I mean, it was still kind of a mission of the week thing, but it was a little bit more pointless. Like, it didn't really have any weight or anything like that when you compared it to the rest. And so this is episode 6. So the 4th episode, that was the one that, another one that you didn't really find any value in. I found more value in it than, that was a pod racing episode. I found more value in it than I think what a lot of people might expect. I did think it forwarded some of the story a little bit, especially when it came to showing a relationship between the Bad Batch and Sid, how it was deepening a little bit. You, of course, had Ernie Hudson's great voice as that one really intimidating character. I can't remember that guy's name. But he's a character I wouldn't mind seeing more of, And
he's kind of cool. I actually like him.
Yeah.
I think this season is kind of focusing on the growth and development of Omega. That's what I'm seeing so far, because most of the things have kind of been Omega-centric, where she's kind of taking the lead. She's kind of getting them in stuff, but then, back out of it. She's the one who's like you said in that episode with the riot. She's the one who is encouraging. Well, we got to help Sid, And
that's true.
This one,
that is true.
You got to help Gunji. The other thing was the whole treasure with Wanda Sykes, character. So it seems to be like we're watching her development.
That's what needs to happen. See, she teams up with Gunji and then the Wanda Sykes character, and they can call themselves the Omega 3.
No.
Hey, you could also do Omega 6, right? If you found another 3, maybe include the Bad Batch in there. I don't know. All right, I'll stop. But you're right. I mean, I think that if we were to find some sort of a common thread in what's going on in the season so far, it would probably be the development of Omega. And look, let's not forget, it was revealed in, I don't remember if it was a season finale of the last season or if it was like right around there, but the fact that she was another unaltered clone that was Boba Fett's sister or something like that now. And, so, I mean, at some point they have to deal with that. The other thing is we haven't seen Crosshair in a while. You had that very heavy Crosshair-centric episode, which I think was like the third one. Was it the second? It might have been. And that was a really good one, too. And they were setting up all kinds of stuff with Crosshair in that episode. And his relationship in the Empire. I'm not necessarily saying with this season that he has to encounter the Bad Batch again. You could literally do something to where you have kind of what we've had for the last 2 or 3 episodes, right? Where you have these Bad Batch-centric episodes, and then you could switch over and see what's going on with Crosshair and the Empire. And then eventually the two can converge. And of course, look, even though we are a third of the way in, we're only a third of the way in. We still have 2/3 of this season to go. There's 10 more episodes. There's a lot that can happen. And some of this stuff may actually be what's going to happen. We might, maybe next week. They actually had the title when I was putting the information on YouTube. And, I always get the title of the episode, of course, and the little synopsis. I saw the title of next week's. I can't remember what it was offhand, but it was one of those interesting titles that you go, oh, I wonder what that's going to be about. So even though, there's some, I don't know if this season is as cohesive as season 1. I think that's probably where I'm struggling with it a little bit. But at the same time, overall, I would say I'm enjoying the season. So I'm really looking forward to seeing where this thing is going to take us next.
Yeah, I can, no pun intended, echo that. What would you rate this episode?
Now let's see. This is a tough one. I'm gonna go. I'll do a 7. I'll do
Exactly
a
what I was
7.
going with.
Yeah, because it was a good episode. It was a fun episode. It wasn't something that was outstanding or anything like that, but it was good, and it actually, kind of like you said earlier, it had some weight to it. There was meaning behind this one, and that's something that's been a little bit different than what we've gotten on the last couple, where it's not that the last couple in and of themselves were really bad. It was just they were kind of meaningless.
Yeah,
just
this
pointless
one actually
adventures.
has some. Yeah, this one actually has some weight to it. It had a nice callback to the Clone Wars. They talked about the Order 66. They addressed like, look, we didn't do the whole Order 66 thing. So we're them trying to explain, and even when that kind of a haunting statement was like, well, the Empire was looking for him on, we'll be looking for him on Kashyyyk. Was like, well, he's a Jedi. He's hunted everywhere. Like, it doesn't matter where he goes.
I thought that was a great line, actually. It's
it was just
like, he's really in danger no matter where he goes. So I think the line was he's not safe anywhere or something like that. And it's like, oh, man's got a point. It's
yeah, exactly. That's why he was like, hey, man, you might want to put that laser sword up, man. It draws attention. So just things like that. And it harkens back to that connective tissue with Obi-Wan. You see it with the Clone Wars. So I think it had that.
It's like, Gunji, how do you feel about being a space butcher?
It was kind of cool just to see Kashyyyk again, and just learning some history. So you got a lot of different things to spice this particular episode up. So that's why I put it a little bit above average. So yeah, I would definitely give it a 7.
Yeah, it's above average because it was something that was, because that's the thing. I could have given it a 6 and made it a little bit above average, but the thing is, it had a cool story. You actually felt real danger and a real threat in this thing. That was why I too gave it a 7, is because, okay, there's a lot of elements in this thing that were really good and really took you for a little bit of a ride, and And the other thing that I really appreciated about it is a lot of things that you thought they might go into cliched territory, they didn't. And that was the thing that amazed me the most, was there's like 2 or 3 things. The way the spiders reacted to them, or whatever those things were. You're right, they're kind of pitch black, Starship Trooper, spidery or whatever. That was one thing. The fact that the episode went in a completely different direction than what it started being was another thing. I mean, there's just a lot of different examples of where they could have gone the route of what everybody does, but they didn't. And so for that reason, you do have to give it a little bit of above average. But of course, it's not about us. Well, it's kind of about us because it's our show, but we like to include all of you guys in on this. The important thing is, what did you think about this? Now, you still have about 30 seconds, even though we haven't actually gotten anybody chatting in today. But you do have about 20 or 30 seconds left to chat in something if you guys want. If not, of course, you can always leave a comment on what you thought about this episode and put a little bit of a poll up there on whether or not you think Season 2 is better than Season 1, or, what you guys are thinking that way. That would be cool if you guys wanted to do that. Of course, if you like this episode and you maybe catch a couple of our episodes and you like the show in general, hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, so that way you don't miss when we come out with new content. And if you're wondering, we are live every Monday and every Friday at 8. If we're not, we'll put that in the community tab, because sometimes, like I said, we're not full-time YouTubers, so, we actually have jobs, and sometimes the job gets in the way, like it did last Monday. But this Monday, I'm really looking forward to this, because we get to talk about Attack of the Clones and get really in depth with it. And that's going to be really, really fun to do, I think. If you guys missed anything else, because what we've been doing lately on Mondays is we're doing this whole What is Star Wars thing. And so the first episode was, we talked about the legacy of Star Wars and what makes Star Wars, basically. And then we started actually doing an in-depth analysis on each one of the films. And so we went through the entire original trilogy, and then a couple of weeks ago we started with The Phantom Menace, and now we're about to do Attack of the Clones on Monday. So if you guys missed our other episodes, you can check them out on the channel. And then, of course, if you like them, hit the like button. And if you want to continue watching us, hit that subscribe button. So, of course, it was good to spend another Friday with you guys. So until Monday, when we do Attack of the Clones, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.